no mercy at all. And even those last-minute goals you were talking about, one of them was his.
Yeah.
Yes, PSG versus Monaco ended 2-2. PSG qualifying 5-4 on aggregate. Real Madrid versus Benfica 2-1 in favor of Real Madrid for an aggregate scoreline of 3-2. Now, on to the Europa Conference League, where Solskjaer beat Drita 3-2 for a 6-4 aggregate scoreline. Samsunspor beat Shendija 4-0 for an aggregate scoreline of 5-0. Fiorentina were beaten by Jagiellonia 4-2 at home, but they ended up qualifying by literally 1 goal difference, a 5-4 winning margin. That is the aggregate scoreline. Rijeka versus Omonia Nikosi, and Rijeka beating Omonia 3-1, and they qualified 4-1 on aggregate. Lausanne lost at home to Sigma Olosumuch, and they lost 2-1 for an aggregate scoreline of 3-2. Crystal Palace beating Zrinski 2-0 for an aggregate scoreline of 3-1. AZ Alkmaar beating Noah 4-0 for an aggregate scoreline of 4-1, and Lech Poznan winning at home 1-0 against Scoops for an aggregate scoreline of 3-0. In the Europa League, Red Star Belgrade lost at home to Lille 2-0, and that's so Lille qualify with an aggregate of 2-1. Panathinaikos and Victoria Pilsen, this one went to a draw, and it went into penalties, where Panathinaikos won 4-3 on penalties, and the aggregate win was for them. So Panathinaikos qualifying. Ferencvaros beat Ludogorets 2-0 for an aggregate scoreline of 3-2. VfB Stuttgart lost at home to Celtic 1-0, but VfB qualified 4-2 on aggregate. Celta Vigo beating PAOK 1-0, and they qualified 3-1 on aggregate. Genk versus Dynamo Zagreb ended 3-3 for an aggregate scoreline of 6-4 in favor of Genk. Fenerbahce beat Nottingham Forest 2-1, but Nottingham Forest qualified 4-2 on aggregate. Bologna beating Bran 1-0 for an aggregate scoreline of 2-0. So Bologna being the ones that qualified. So Thige, I believe that's it as far as Europe is concerned. Now let's talk about FUC.
What a dramatic shift. But then tukitoka hapo, I was still just saying, I just still looking at this draw.
Yes.
Just as we get away from it, Moriah, just
Yes.
allow me just a bit
No
on it.
problem. No
Galatasaray, after that demolition of Juventus, are facing Liverpool.
Liverpool, exactly.
next.
And it's not going to be an easy game for Liverpool as well.
That's a crazy tie. It's mouth-watering.
I'm sure Mesfin on the other side must be celebrating, and of course as well as our boss Asmali, who's also a Liverpool fan.
Let them not celebrate.
Capi is also a Liverpool fan, so, and I know they're all listening to us at this particular moment.
But I tell you that Galatasaray team, the depth in it and the determination and what is happening in the Turkish Super League and the determination of that league to rise up and challenge the biggest and the best in Europe, that's going to be a mouth-watering tie. Newcastle versus Barcelona. You can forgive me, Moriah, for imagining Newcastle were playing in the Europa League, because it's Newcastle, a team that is doing so badly in the EPL, against a team called Karabag.
True.
But yes, it was Champions League action, and they're facing Barcelona. That is bound to be a high-scoring encounter. Looking forward to that. Now, Moriah, I'm done with the Champions League. Sasa unaweza nipeleka kwa FC.
Turudi hapa nyumbani. Hapa sasa ndio hata tunaweza stukia ametuzimia mitambo. Kidogo hatuendi hewani. So yesterday we had a few KPL matches that were played. We had Kenya Police versus Sofapaka. Kenya Police winning 2-0. Ulinzi versus Kakamega Homeboys. That one ended 1-1. Bidco United and Mara Sugar ended 2-2. Kariobangi Sharks beat APS Bomet 1-0. Now, this game that I want us to talk about is AFC Leopards versus KCB, because Matano, Robert Matano, a very good friend, is the coach over at KCB. And yesterday he showed these FUC guys fire.
You know, it's called, it's a scenario when the leopard meets the lion.
The lion.
Yes.
It was a fight between the two big cats.
Matano is called the lion, and for no jokes. And I was just thinking about our colleague Shadrach Adenga. It would have been really, really cool to just engage him on this one because he's a massive KPL follower. But then again, looking at Matano's football, if you just followed his teams, they're not very interested in exciting football. They're not interested in tiki-taka. They play very hard football.
Yes.
They play very aggressive football. And that's exactly what they unleashed. And the coach, after the game, he was very clear. He was like, no. That boy called Kelly Madada, that's the guy who's been creating everything around that FC team. So my instructions are very, very clear.
Funga huyu jamaa, lima huyu jamaa,
huyo jamaa asicheze ball.
Kila time akiguza ball hivi kanyaga.
Chini.
Kanyaga.
Alafu, you should see, I watched also some images on the press, on media. The guy who was marking, I don't know his name, I don't know the guy's name. The guy who was marking Kelly Madada, alimpatia body, anakaka mbavu the destroyer. Huyo
jamaa ameenda gym vizuri, amestunya kona.
That's exactly what happened. And so AFC, their title hopes got a very huge dent. They're now 6 points exactly. It ended up... they're 6 points behind the top team, which is Gor Mahia FC.
Yes.
And they are facing Shabana next. So it's not easy. Shabana won their game. They are tied at second position. In fact, their only difference, I think AFC is second only on goal difference. But then this weekend they will be separated. And Shabana, awana mchezo. Shabana have come into Nairobi early on in the week. They won their game comfortably. And so they're facing now AFC Leopards over the weekend. It's going to be a big one. And Gor Mahia, I'm sure, they have one eye on what's happening with the Sports Dispute Tribunal. I don't know whether that's what you're looking for.
That's what I was actually looking for in terms of an update. I'm being told it was a mention today, and it has been heard. That's what I was looking for. But all in all, nataka bado tusitaki tutoke kwa history FC, because this thing was being discussed in a group, with other journalists, Kenyan journalists, and one of them happened to mention that the FC happens to owe, kuna mganga fulani wanakuanga na deni yake. Apparently, unajua sasa hizi ni rumors. So huyu jamaa alisema hakuna vile FC itawaishinda league until huyu jamaa alipo ndo yake.
Mganga ndo yake.
Until mganga alipochapa yake. Literally. So, hata vile Noah was already starting to celebrate and reminding us every week. By the way, unajua FC are top of the
this
league.
Time we are taking it. After 28 years.
Sasa they are 6 points behind Gor Mahia.
And it doesn't seem like it's
na Gor Mahia kuachilia saa itakuwa ngumu.
It's not going back to the cat's den. It doesn't seem like it's going that way, because Gor Mahia have been very solid. They've been very consistent. They've been winning their games very consistently. In fact, the one thing that can give a dent to their title credentials, Muraya, is that Sports Dispute Tribunal, maneno. Juu inaweza kata hiyo lead by up to 3 points. In fact, the team that I fear the most, if Shabana beat AFC Leopards,
and it's a big possibility,
and assume second place, Shabana sasa ndio wanaweza peleka Gor Mahia
to the wire.
Ile mbio sasa.
Na unajua by the way, Shabana naona wakili Maingwe.
That's looking very likely.
It's a very huge likelihood.
Because in terms of fans, watawachapa. In terms of wale wasiota attend grao, ni Nairobi ndio. Whether it's in Gusii, or it's in Nairobi, or it's in Mombasa, or anywhere. Shabana, mafans wako.
Shabana, kuna siku walikuwa sijui wanacheza. I can't remember who they were playing.
Bomet.
Kuna watu walikuwa wanacheza nao. Hiyo game ilikuwa pale, ilikuwa hapa nini? Ulinzi Stadium. The number of buses zilikuwa hapo na zote ziko na colors za Shabana. Manganya zilikuwa hapo, zilikuwa most. And you could literally tell, in fact I was even feeling sorry for the opponent's team. Because ni ile design unaangalia hivi unajua already huyu ni mtu already ako disadvantage. As in
intimidation, the fun, crazy diehard fans. It's tough to play against Shabana. And as you've said, I see them beating AFC Leopards. And if they beat AFC Leopards, that's the kind of team, if they smell the title, wanuse tu wafikirie hii title actually ni possible. Hao ndio watu watapeleka Gor Mahia mbio yenye hawajaipeleka.
Unajua hata unafanya unitake kuangalia kama Gor Mahia bado wako na game na Shabana imebaki. Tutaangalia. As I also now take you through the fixtures for these weekends, KPL. Gor Mahia will be facing Mathare United tomorrow at 4 p.m. Kenya Police will play Bandari on Sunday. Muranga Seals against Posta Rangers will also be on Sunday. FC Leopards, like you've rightfully said, are facing Shabana. Hii game iko Nyayo by the way.
Sunday.
On Sunday iko Nyayo. So FC ndio wako nyumbani. But it don't matter. Just like you've said, Kakamega Homeboys versus APS Bomet, that is on Monday. Bidco United versus Ulinzi Stars is also on Monday. Mara Sugar versus Sofapaka is also on Monday. And then to close this weekend's fixtures, we have Kariobangi Sharks against Tusker FC. Umepata kama ulikuwa unaangalia kama Gor Mahia game na nani?
No. I've not checked whether they're playing Shabana, but we can just take a look at that and just give you an update on that in a very, very short while.
No problem. Let's take a short musical break. We'll be back to discuss that and also other matters.
Extra. The Sports Garage.